Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Code. Today on our show, I'm joined by Erin West, the Deputy District Attorney in Santa Clara County. And I'm going to stop there because I really don't believe in introducing people. You're probably better equipped to do that than I am. What I will say is that you're something of a LinkedIn influencer, and I highly recommend to all of our listeners to go and give you a follow. You have great content, and based on the fact that I live in Israel and I've heard all about Operation Shamrock, which you'll tell us about soon, you're obviously doing a very good job getting your message across. So why don't we start by telling us, who are you, Erin?
I just want to thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And it's amazing to me that sitting in Israel, you've heard about Operation Shamrock. That literally makes my day. So I am a county prosecutor. I'm a local prosecutor. I've been a DA for 26 years. And I've done all kinds of different work as a prosecutor, but for the last 8 years, I have been specially assigned to the REACT task force. That is a high-tech task force that specializes in emerging technology. And we've done a lot of cases involving investigations on the blockchain, things involving cryptocurrency.
And how did you get into that? I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions I want to ask you there. I want to understand a little bit more about React. I want to understand what that means, high tech fraud and scams, like what falls underneath that title, and like what it looks like from a legal perspective.
Sure. For me personally, I was just coming off an extended period on the sexual assault team. And that was really important work, but I felt like I needed a break from that. And at that time, I had younger boys, and I was becoming concerned about what was happening in social media and what they would be exposed to online. And I was hearing more and more about the dangers online. And I thought, oh, well, this actually could be an interesting pivot for my career. That we have high-tech crime, and the person who had this job at that time was doing a lot of outreach to educate people about the dangers online for kids. And so that seemed interesting to me. When I got to the assignment, so I'll tell you a little bit about React. React is it's a high-tech task force. It's made up of local detectives. In the late 90s, the California legislature realized that there was an entire new type of crime emerging, this high-tech crime business, and that we could be getting left behind if we didn't put some money into educating our law enforcement about how to handle this type of crime. So they created five task forces within the state of California, and React is one of them.
So it's a state task force. It's not a county.
It is a county task force. Yeah, it's a county. So it's funded by the state. There are 5 of them within the state. And then ours is they're each run by different organizations. Ours is run by Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. But we have an area of responsibility that is 4 different counties and probably 6 million people.
Wow. And
yeah,
so...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I was just going to say, when I first came to the task force, we were doing a lot of identity theft cases that were being done at scale, where people were taking on multiple identities, buying identities off the dark web, creating like actually processing the credit cards themselves, and then doing larger scale identity theft. But in 2018, our focus turned to cryptocurrency when we started seeing the first SIM swappers. And that is a type of hacking where the hackers take over the traffic coming to your phone. They redirect it from your phone to the phone they are holding. And that enables them to be the ones, when we put in yitzyhammer@gmail.com and it says forgot password, that code goes to the device that the scammer is holding. And so
So you basically lose everything. You lose your
you
phone, you
do.
lose your mail, your identity, your passwords. Like that's a scary
It's a
one.
it's a devastating loss because you have lost control of your entire digital persona. And we think of how that really is becoming more and more important than our real life persona in terms of accessing all the data about us. But in particular, with regard to SIM swapping, they were after your finances. And so what they would do is while you were asleep, they would take over your accounts and then they would move to your cryptocurrency account. People would wake up realizing they had lost access to their phone, and
Oh my
then
God.
that in fact they had lost access to their crypto and lost millions of dollars while they slept.
So how do you prevent SIM swapping? I know that that's probably like an entire podcast in and of itself, but
Yeah, no,
uh,
actually, that's a really good question. The fact is, you can't really. If you're going to get SIM swapped, you're going to get SIM swapped. The trick is to protect the rest of your data so that your Gmail account doesn't, you're not using your phone as your recovery. You want to use an authenticator or some other piece of information, some other device that is not your phone. Your phone is risky because if you think about it, there are people in kiosks at your mall who can redirect the traffic on your phone. It's that easy to SIM swap you.
wow,
Yeah.
scary. So it started with SIM
Yeah.
swapping, and then presumably at some point it evolved into pig butchering.
That's exactly right. Starting in March 2022, we got our first pig
Okay,
butchering case.
so for all those listeners who, like me, didn't know what pig butchering was until I started coming across your content, give us a little background.
Sure. The short version is this. Pig butchering is it's a translation of a Chinese term called shazupan. And it is a Chinese origin scam that is a combination romance scam slash cryptocurrency investment scheme. So it's a long con. It's where our scammers reach out and try and hook people by sending text messages, which appear to be like, oh my gosh, I don't think this message about someone needing to go to the vet is for me. I think this must be someone else.
And then,
Or
like a
they'll
good
drop into
Samaritan, you
your,
want to help them out, and then you become endeared to them. I mean, I'll let you, I'll let you set the tone,
yeah, but Yitzy, you're
set the scene.
exactly right. That's the thing is they prey on our good nature and we want to help someone whose dog needs to get to the vet. And so we start talking to them. And so what they're looking to do is they're looking to start that conversation. And then they are looking to, over the next 90 days, build a relationship with you that's unlike any relationship you've ever had. And they'll spend up to 4 or 5 hours a day texting with our victims and really providing them with a close, trusted friendship. All the while, they are showing the victim this elevated lifestyle that they live. They're showing them pictures of themselves playing golf, driving nice cars, traveling. And then ultimately, our victims will say, hey, how are you able to afford that? And they'll say, oh, I invest in cryptocurrency. I didn't know how to do that, but my uncle taught me, and my uncle could teach you. And why this gets so bad is because our victims are lured to make a small investment at first, and they're shown these fake returns of their 5,000 has gone to 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 by the end of the week. And then
Oh
they
my
get
God.
lured into liquidating all of their retirement accounts, their children's college funds, and they believe that they are millionaires. And they are millionaires that have found the love of their life. And so they are on cloud 9 until they come to find out when they try to take money out that, wow, this whole thing was a scam. And not only is all my money gone, this person I trusted is not who I thought they were.
Wow, it must be like a level of devastation like no other on an emotional level. Like you probably feel isolated from the rest of your family that maybe you were withholding this information from. I mean, I know it's not PC, but we're less PC in Israel. I imagine that this demographic is predominantly male, late age males. No, although
You know,
when leading before I got on the podcast with you, I remember that we had something on like our family WhatsApp group a number of years ago where my mom wrote that my grandmother had fallen into some scam like this. So I called her up to ask her, like, Ma, do you remember that scam you were telling us about? It was like pre-COVID. My grandmother, unfortunately, is late level dementia now, but at the time, she had gotten called up by this police officer who told her that her granddaughter was was arrested or was in some kind of trouble and needs X amount of money to be sent immediately. So my grandmother went to the bank, took out the money, gave it to some FedEx guy, and sent it. At some point, she told my mom and my aunt, and they managed to. Can't remember how they managed to get the money back, but I imagine that this was an early stage evolution of what later became, these pig butchering scams. Because this was must have been about 10 years ago already. And I guess with crypto and AI and whatnot, it's already evolved to much more complex levels.
Yeah, but the one that your grandmother was a victim of still persists today. It's amazing
Really?
that I still hear of things like that happening. And yes, I think we've always been subject to scams of one kind or another. And the evolution of scams as they're getting better, and they're getting that's what well so first you asked me about the demographic, and what's interesting about the demographic is that I can understand why you would think exactly what you think, and I would think that too. But the fact is, it is male, female, it is young, old,
Wow.
it is literally anybody that has a smartphone is falling for
Wow.
these. And in fact, I think the FBI data shows that it's a lot of people in their 30s to 50s. And so it's I hear from victims all the time, and I hear from victims of all across the board. But what's interesting about what you raised is this whole idea of isolation of the victim, and that's definitely part of the plan. Is the part of the scam is using really time-tested psychological techniques of isolating the victim and really creating a situation where the victim thinks this scammer, this my loved one, is really the only person I can trust, that he is letting me in or she's letting me in on some really special investment secret, and because she loves me and wants to take care of me, and my family won't understand this, and certainly the people at the bank won't understand this, so I have to lie to them too. And it really we're finding it hard to break victims once they're under this spell. And I've even heard from like adult children saying, I think my mom is involved in a pig butchering thing. And I'll always say, oh, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. Tell her to watch the John Oliver 25-minute segment on this, which if you haven't watched, you should go watch today because it's that good. And then they'll say, no, she's watched that. And she says, yeah, that's pig butchering, but I'm not being pig butchered. I'm in love. This is an actual person that I'm in love with. And so it's really, we really need some psychological techniques going the other way of how we can get these people out from under the spell.
Wow. So what do you think it is? Like, are there specific gatekeepers that you've targeted where we could say, okay, this is where people are first being onboarded to these scams, and this is where we need to kind of be most aware and put a stop to it?
It's funny because you are identifying all of the same things that I identified early on when I started looking at these. And to me, the key to this initially was, well, we've got to stop the opportunities for these scammers to access our victims. And so it was primarily coming from a couple of locations. One, it was coming from the dating apps. It was coming from LinkedIn. It was coming from places in the metaverse, in Meta, like Facebook, Instagram, and then these weird text messages. And so I've definitely
That's what I think of when I think of these kind of things. The weird text messages.
They're
I
so
hear
weird,
the delay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the text messages are super weird, and they've gotten so much better. I remember some of the early day ones as compared to the ones today, like, you left your bag at my house, or like you or whatever, where you're like, oh, did I leave my, like, who is this? What? Just things where you're like, oh, I wouldn't want to miss out on whatever this is. So I will return that. text.
Wow. So pig butchering. I mean, when you think about, I didn't initially know where the name came from, but then when I Googled it, I understand that it's refers to how the scammers kind of like fatten up their victims by like building trust over time before quote unquote slaughtering them and stealing all their money and leaving them alone and sad. Which it's really, really brutal. So I mean, I wonder if you can give me some of like the gory stories about pig butchering, but also some of the glory stories. Just like, I don't know, some of your
Sure.
war stories from the last couple of years.
Sure. The gory stories are horrific. We know about adult children come to find out that a parent has committed suicide and they don't know why, and no note was left. And then when they start going through their parents' online persona, they come to find out that, oh my gosh, they were involved in a pig butchering situation and they lost the entire family nest egg. Like all of the family wealth had been lost to pig butchering, and the parent just couldn't take it and ended up committing suicide. There are a number of stories just like that. There are a number of stories where people are just living a life that it feels super desperate to them. Like they have put everything they had into this, and in fact, they get tricked at the end to even put more money into it by getting a loan against their house. So they emerge penniless and with increased debt.
With debt.
And they are literally having to sell cars and homes to pay for this mess. We know about retirees who are having to go back to work in their early 60s because they've lost all their money. The stories are horrible and devastating. Another one I think about is an adult child reached out to me and said, my mom wanted to tell me, she wanted my help in knowing how to pay the mortgage on her condo. And I told her, Mom, you don't have a mortgage on your condo. And she said, oh, I do now. And this scammer had showed her how to take all the equity out of her condo and invest it. And so that was, an expensive, right, invest in quotes. I mean, and so when you think of people who at the end of their lives don't have the length of time available to them to recreate this wealth, it's a really scary place to be. And what's happening worldwide is that this devastation is happening to the victims. And this is what we started to talk about at the beginning of the podcast, is law enforcement wasn't definitely ready to handle this mess. This was all new. We started talking about how React began to work some of these cases. And we got our first case in March of 2022. And what we found was a victim who came to us. He was 30 years old, a software engineer. He had lost $300,000, which was all that he had. And he was really devastated, exactly how you described, a devastation that we haven't seen before. When you take away someone's financial stability and their trusted person in the same day, it is a cannon blast that, yeah, it's a cannon blast that they certainly don't expect and aren't prepared to deal with. So when we got this case, now heading into something hopeful, our officers had previous success in tracing cryptocurrency from the SimSwap days. And they knew how to seize crypto, they knew how to trace it, they knew how to hold it, and how to get it back to victims. And so we decided to take this first case of our software engineer as a test case and see if we might be able to help him recover his money. We knew that these scammers were in Southeast Asia and that we would unlikely be able to access them for prosecution, but we thought, well, I wonder if we could get some of the money back. So we traced the cryptocurrency on the blockchain, and we found that it ended in Binance, which is located outside the United States and is not subject to a United States search warrant. But we thought it was worth trying. So we got a judge to sign a search warrant saying, you are in possession of stolen property from a Santa Clara County victim, and we would like it back. And Binance honored it. And they sent back nearly 70% of this man's loss that they still had.
Wow.
Amazing.
Presumably, you could only get your hands on the cash if it's still on an exchange. I mean, then
That's
once it's
exactly
on an
right.
exchange, it depends if the exchange is gonna, play ball. I wonder. I mean, these scams have been going on for some time now. Why would any of these scammers keep their funds on an exchange if they understand the risks that the exchange may or may not play ball with the law enforcement and seize and return the funds?
I
I
wish
mean,
you were.
I assume that they're keeping them on the exchange because they want to off rent them somehow. But then just do your business and get out of there. Like, why would they keep it on the exchange for a prolonged period of time? I also presume that a lot of these victims are, sitting on their story for quite some time because they feel so isolated. And by the time they come to you, they may not be on the exchange anymore. And if they are, again, why is the scammer keeping them there for such a long time? I don't expect that you have all the answers to these things. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, if I was a scammer, I would probably be doing it differently.
I wish you were on Operation Shamrock with me, because you are picking up this whole problem so quickly. And so, yes, so we had some success with this blueprint for about a year. And then scammers got wise to what we were doing. And I called it like we're throwing eggs at a skyscraper, thinking we're going to knock this skyscraper down, because what we were doing had such a small impact on their bottom line. But what the scammers were becoming clearly aware of is, if we leave this money at cooperative exchanges, the U.S. government can
Not your
come for it.
keys, not your cash,
You
as
got
they
it.
say.
You got it. You got it. So they've changed. They've changed how they operate, and they move things just more quickly, which leads into your second point, which is, by the time the victims get to us, they have sat on this for quite some time. They don't want to face it. They're embarrassed. They're humiliated. They don't trust the government to help them. But ultimately, some will come to us, and we have been successful in helping some of them. But you're right. It is definitely, it is a speed game. And so we often lose just on the delay in
Well, I
reporting.
guess depending on what your motivation is, I mean, if you get there fast enough, then you can get your hands on the money at least, and then you make them whole again. But, and again, maybe this is not how it looks, but I imagine that if you're too late and they already off ramped, then they had to identify themselves at some point. I mean, presumably they had to KYC with a bank or with the exchange if it was a substantial enough amount of money, and then maybe you'd be able to find out who they were. Again, I don't know if you'd have the motivation as like a county react force to go after these people in Southeast Asia or whatever, but at least like you may be able to bring a perpetrator to justice if you had some kind of an idea as to who they were.
Do we have the motivation? For sure. So do we have the ability?
The
That's
resources.
where it gets tricky. So let me tell you. So frequently, the KYC will be in the name of a money mule. And so we've had a number of conversations with these money mules because we have interrupted their flow of the money movement. And so they have reached out to us, and we've had conversations, and they've explained that they are not the scammer. They are just moving money. And I believe that, because they are all over rural Southeast Asia. That there is a business in being a Binance account. There is a business in holding a Binance account and allowing the flow of money through the account. So what we were seeing is the accounts that we seized money from had 12, 15 million go through them in the last 6 months. And then when they call us to talk and they say, "Oh, I'm a nail salon owner in rural Thailand," and we're like, "Well, that certainly is a lucrative business you've got going." So their stories didn't make sense. But you seriously, it feels like I wrote these questions for you because you are leading me exactly where I ended up, which is, this won't stand. Like, we cannot have these bad actors in Southeast Asia fleecing the world of all their money. How do we take a more proactive stand about looking at the head of this snake and not just trying to scoop up stuff at the end? And so that's what Operation Shamrock is really about. I started talking about it online just in terms of, well, what we can do is educate, seize, and disrupt. And those were my initial thoughts when I was organizing an attack on this. And the educate part is easy. Like, this scam doesn't stop until it's in your family text thread and it's in everybody else's family text thread, and you're talking about it next to people you sit next to on planes or at the golf course or at your kid's soccer game. Everybody needs to know about this. That was the idea. And let's seize what we can and let's disrupt the operation that they're doing. But on a bigger scale, we need enforcement. This activity is being run by organized crime syndicates. We know that. We know that this is happening in what were originally set up to be casino towers that were going to house online gaming ventures. And we know that those were set up by Chinese gangsters who some are already sanctioned by the US government. And what we know is that in COVID, that those businesses stopped being functional because nobody was traveling to do gambling. And so what they ended up doing, these syndicates, is thinking, well, let's pivot to Shazupan, to pig butchering.
Wow.
And so how are they going to staff those? They need a lot of people to do pig butchering. So they started putting up ads online advertising for really smart people who were multilingual and telling them that they were going to work as a graphic designer, or they were going to do some sort of office work, but they could live and work, and then making these feel like real jobs. They would do interviews. And what happened to these people is they would arrive in Bangkok to get ready for their job, and their passports would be seized. They'd be put on buses
Oh my
and
God.
be moved to these locked facilities where they were forced to do this scamming 17 hours a day under threat of violence.
Wow. So this is human trafficking, essentially.
So it's a horrific worldwide concern in that we have human trafficked modern day slaves as the backbone for this scam industry that's taking all the money from the rest of the world. And the only people that are winning are these gangsters, these bad actors, and they're winning in a massive way. Billions and billions of dollars going into their hands.
I mean, this sounds like an insane global threat, and I feel like you're the only person who I know, at least, who's talking about this. Like, doesn't it feel like a little bit big on you?
Oh, it's big. It's big. It's very big.
I mean, this is a huge thing.
This is it's a can't stop, won't stop.
I mean, I think it needs like a global task force. Like, I don't think I don't know. Like, so where are you going with this? Like, how are you gonna take down this this global threat?
So I've been making a lot of noise, and I've been talking, and I've been on podcasts like yours, which lead to other podcasts, which lead to opportunities to talk to banking, but my goal is to get this to the highest levels of U.S. government. That we need a whole of government solution to this. That we need Congress to weigh in on this. We need a presidential mandate that we need a task force for this, because it's a massive, massive international problem. I was lucky to be part of a senior study group that wrote a paper with the United States Institute of Peace, and it's a beautifully written, comprehensive examination of the geopolitical situation and what our policy recommendations are for that. And we presented it in DC, and when we presented it, we had an introduction from Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Brandon Yoder, who called this a national security issue. I know that now, yeah, so it's getting where it needs to go, but it's a slow process. And
It
it
seems like the
needs
American
some.
political system is preoccupied with other things right now.
You're not kidding. Yeah,
No, I'm not.
you're
I'm not
not.
kidding.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going
Yep.
on in both of our countries.
Yeah.
It's so it's difficult to get this the attention it deserves. But meanwhile, we are moving a generation's worth of wealth from our country into the hands of bad actors. And it's not just us. I suspect there are plenty of Israelis who have also been hit by this. I'm not as familiar with what's happening in Israel, but I can tell you I know it's happening in Germany. I know they're targeting South America. I know that they initially targeted China. And it's a worldwide phenomenon. So I would be surprised if Israelis were not also being targeted.
Absolutely. I mean, also leading up to our podcast today, I called a friend of mine who's previously a prosecutor here in Israel, and dealt with cybercrime. And I asked him if this is, something that's if it's a big deal here. He said he was personally aware over the last few months of several pig butchering crypto related scams. And so obviously it's going on everywhere and it's reached all parts of the world. We don't have an Erin West to broadcast it here locally, but hopefully this podcast will fall upon the right ears, both in North America and here in the Middle East.
I sure hope so. Yeah, it's a major problem. And speaking of Middle East, we know that the global footprint is growing, and we know that there are compounds in Dubai. We know that they are moving to Africa, that there has been a compound in South America, that they are going after locations where they think they can fly under the radar and will not be subject to U.S. government or other government intrusion.
So, I mean, maybe we can't stop them. We can't stop their efforts. What we could do is we could stop them reaching where they need to reach. So on a local jurisdiction level, at least doing whatever we can to identify these types of text messages. I mean, I'm sure algorithmically there are things that could be done there to identify. I can't imagine that they're so creative I mean, it must be to some extent, but I imagine they use the same type of, pickup lines time and time again. And algorithmically, they should be able to identify these kind of things and flag it in some way or another. So I don't know if anybody's listening and wants to develop a product here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, they couldn't possibly be that creative. When you think about these text messages and you ask a room of people if they've been hit with it, yes, they have. Everybody has. That's how broad their reach is. And so could they possibly be that creative? I don't think so. It feels to me like this is something that there is a tech solution for. And it also feels like something that our social media should take more ownership in trying to prevent.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at my Twitter messages, junk folder, it's literally 1 million of these Asian girls sending misspelled WhatsApp, something weird like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it works for some people.
I mean, that's the thing too, is obviously it does, or we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Right.
Whether we think it would happen to us or not, it is happening.
So you said it reaches every demographic, and you also said you have teenage boys. I also have a teenage son and daughter, and I wonder how much you talk about this with them, and whether or not they're ambassadors among other teens and walking around telling everybody beware of pig butchering, or is it something that you just try and keep out of the house?
I talk about this all the time. It's funny. I always joke, my kids could be out there doing these podcasts. They have heard my podcasts so many times, but the one I really talk about with my kids though is sextortion, and I embarrass the daylights out of them. I will drive them, a bunch of boys, and drop them off somewhere, and I'll be like, I need a verbal agreement from everyone in this van that you're not going to send any pics of yourself, and if you do, you're sure not going to put your face in them. And they'll be like, oh my God, Mom, stop. But you know what? We're talking about it because I know there are people in their circle who have done this. And so you gotta have the conversation.
Wow. So sextortion, I wasn't familiar with that one. I mean, I imagine that people send dick pics with their faces in it, and then they're extorted, sextorted.
Oh
It's a good
God.
one. I like that one.
I'm
That's
sorry
better than
you don't know
Operation
this.
Shamrock.
I'm sorry you don't know about this because kids are literally killing themselves. Teenage boys are killing themselves. And I think there have been something like 39 suicides in the United States this year from kids killing themselves.
Wow.
It's a
Just because
whole
of the
thing.
embarrassment and the isolation. Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
it
Wow.
happens quickly. It happens within 6 hours of this happening. Like
Wow.
they're on Snapchat. Somebody reaches out. Somebody is like showing pictures of herself, talking to them, getting them to send their stuff. But meanwhile, they have engaged some sort of operation on the kid's phone where they've figured out who all their friends are. They've already downloaded who all the friends are. And then they threaten that we're going to send this to all your friends if you don't pay us. And a lot of
And they don't have
teenage
money, or
boys
they have
don't
to
have
do
money
something
or
ridiculous
access
to
to
get the
money.
money. Wow. 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 Wow.
Yeah. I didn't mean to derail
Wow.
our conversation, but there are plenty of threats out there.
No, thank you for informing me. Hopefully I never have to be
Yeah.
informed on a personal level.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that was
A
heavy.
somber reminder. Yeah. You didn't think you were getting to dick pics today, but here we are.
God. Wow, thank you so much. This was really fun and enlightening. I hope that somebody who's listening will get this to the right ears in the US government and wherever else it needs to get to. And hopefully you'll make your loved ones and yourself aware of the dangers of being online, just being today, because online is everywhere. You don't have to go online, you're just there. And you should follow Erin on LinkedIn. And where else could people follow you?
Yeah, just LinkedIn. I'm mostly LinkedIn these days. So
Or you could check out the Operation Shamrock website.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, actually, no, we don't have a website, but we are Operation Shamrock on LinkedIn as well.
Okay. You do have a website in your social media posts, but it doesn't go anywhere. Just FYI.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
So no website, just LinkedIn. And thank you, Erin. This is great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.